It has always been notoriously dangerous to journey the Great Road. It spans many miles through the Great Western Kingdom, and the Royal Guard are unable to keep in check all the beasts and their minions hiding along its path. While the local townsfolk rarely travel the road unaccompanied, glory hungry heroes can commonly be found at many of its milestones, hunting villains to earn glory. But nowhere along the Great Road is more dangerous than the ancients' Dartima Fortress. Legend has it that the ancestral Watcher guards the crumbling ruins of Dartima. But that isn't the only monster lurking in the dark. Heroes will have to have their wits about them to resist the seductive vampire and sharpen their swords to battle a ferocious minotaur. Confronting these formidable foes will be a challenge even to the bravest heroes of the realm. Are your heroes up to the task? All right, guys, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here, and are you ready for an epic roll and write dungeon crawl, or should I say a dungeon scrawler game? And that is Paper Dungeons. I find it absolutely hilarious that a thematic roll and write has a story associated with the dungeon. Not only that, but it has a campaign mode that you can play where you will go through a series of dungeons, each one telling a different part of the story. So the roll and write genre, basically a evolution of Yahtzee, and some, I guess, might argue that they've never been better than Yahtzee. Yahtzee is a game that I actually like to play a lot with friends when we're just hanging around in the backyard, especially during the summertime. But over the last few years, there have been a lot of roll and writes, some of them more abstract, like Yahtzee, like, was it That's So Clever? And then ones that kind of simulate a Euro-style game. And then lately, we have been getting some more thematic roll and writes. And that is basically what Paper Dungeons is. So Paper Dungeon says, Paper Dungeon reinvents the classic dungeon crawler with a new dynamic roll and write twist. You'll control a group of intrepid adventurers as they explore crypts, catacombs, and cavernous chambers, fighting monsters and looting treasures along the way. In every game, you will be able to level up characters, craft items, explore rooms with all sorts of villainous creatures, from the mighty Minotaur and to the fabled Emperor Dragon. Are you ready to roll and write your name in the history books? So yeah, a dungeon crawl as a roll and write. Does this game feel like a dungeon crawl? No. But it does a good job of simulating and representing a lot of the things we like in dungeon crawl games. This is a game that I would pull out if I did have some friends over, some gamer friends, and we wanted something light, but we also wanted something to give us a little bit of that thematic element that maybe something like That's So Clever or Yahtzee would not. So in the game of Paper Dungeons, you are taking a party of adventurers, and you have warriors and wizards and clerics and rogues. And you are going to be rolling dice, and you are going to be spinning the symbols on those dice to level up your heroes, which is going to give you certain strength that you can use to fight big monsters like the Minotaur or the Vampire or the Watcher. Depending on which of the dungeons you have chosen to explore, you will have 3 different boss monsters to fight, levels 1, 2, and 3. And here are all of the various monsters: a golem, gargoyle, mummy, giant, chimera, elemental, hydra, lich, and a dragon. So you can level up your heroes, and as you level up your heroes, you might get more strength to fight some of the beasts, some of the monsters. You might be able to re-roll or use dice for certain other elements. You might be able to protect yourself from damage, and the rogue might be able to give you some extra jewels for your scoring at the end. And as you level up your heroes, you are going to be gaining more health, and that way it kind of protects you from the various places where you're going to be taking damage in the dungeon. You can also spin your dice symbols and faces to craft all of these various relics, all of these ancient relics. And all of the relics are mentioned in the back of the book here. And they will kind of tell you what they do. At least I thought there was. Where is that? It's somewhere around here. But each one of these relics, like a flaming sword, a scepter, an amulet, a cloak, a crown, will give you either certain bonus points at the end, or will allow you to do certain things such as kill minions, or cross spaces with water, or maybe cross walls, craft potions, and level up your heroes. Another thing that you can spend your points on is traversing the dungeon. And as you move through the dungeon, you will encounter, at various points, you will encounter places where you can build relics, where you can craft potions, and where you can fight minions, which you will have to compare your different characters' level with the minion. And if you kill that minion, you get to go ahead and mark off on the minion track here how many minions you have killed for certain points. You can travel through the dungeon to collect gems for points. And as you craft potions, you're going to be filling in these bubbles on the potion track. And those are also going to be ways that you can mitigate damage. And as you craft more potions, each fourth potion you craft is going to give you a certain bonus as well. One thing that is really cool about the game is each dungeon is different. And there are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different dungeons. And so you have your normal sheet without anything filled in. And then when you select a dungeon, you're going to look to see what the various main boss monsters are going to be fighting. And those are going to be represented by here. So level 1, level 2, and level 3. And then each of the different cards will also have you draw in additional wall elements in the dungeon to make traversing the dungeon a little different depending on the scenario that you have chosen. So that's actually really cool because each game can be different. And as you spend dice to move through the dungeon, you do have to navigate around traps and navigate around minions. And you do want to make sure that you move into the squares or across the squares that the boss monsters are on. So at the end of each round, you have an opportunity to fight that monster, to get the bonus points, and to get the various rewards that the boss might give you. So I think that is really cool. I like the idea of moving through the dungeon. I like the idea of each of the scenarios having a slightly different dungeon, and it does make you think about how you're going to traverse the dungeon in a different way. Two of the relics that you can build, like this amulet and this cloak, well, they might help you cross rivers, or they might help you pass through walls. And one of the rooms here, as you can see, is completely surrounded. So you have to have that cloak to move into that room, and then you will have to face that trap, and then you can get that gem. And as you get the gems, you will get more points as well. And then at the beginning of the game, you're going to deal out 3 of these, are kind of like side quests or missions. And these are going to be different ways to get points at the end of the game, different ways to score. And then each of the players is going to get 2 power cards, and they can choose one. And each one of these is going to give the player kind of a different way that they can break the rules, or maybe power up their characters, or just augment the way they play. This is like a bonus power. And then also each of the characters is going to get 2 of these other side quests or missions. And then you can choose one. And this is going to kind of give you something to work towards, where you can get a certain amount of points if you do a certain number of things. And it's also going to tell you in which dice are your heroes skilled in the way that they train. So in this instance, my warrior would use white dice, my mage would use black dice, my cleric would use white dice, and my rogue would use black dice. And each of the cards has like kind of a different combination of those 2 things, because as you roll the dice, you're going to be looking for the symbols for your characters. And certain symbols appear on white dice and black dice. And then that way you can, if you have a black mage, then you can use the black die to power up that mage. But you might have a white mage, in which case you would have to use the white mage dice to power up that mage. So it's pretty cool. And each turn, each round, you're going to be rolling the dice. and you're going to be looking for skulls. If you ever roll 3 skulls in the first roll, you re-roll. And if you ever roll 3 of the lucky clovers in the first roll, you will re-roll. If you don't do that at all, then you're going to keep all the dice, and then you can spend them to level up your rogue or your wizards or your clerics or your warriors. You can use the boots to give you additional movement as you are moving through the dungeon. These skulls always do damage to you, unless you've powered up your cleric to level 4, in which case you can ignore all damage from skulls. And then these are kind of like wild cards that you can use to level up any hero. And then every player around the board is going to, or who's playing, is going to be able to use each one of these rolled dice one time. And that you're going to take 3 actions. You're going to have 9 actions before you fight the first boss, another 9 actions before you fight the second boss, and then 6 actions before you fight the third boss. And basically, you just want to level up your characters. You want to craft some relics that are going to help you. You want to craft some potions that are going to protect you. And you want to fight some minions to get some points. You want to maybe try to collect some gems around the dungeon to get some points. And you want to make sure that you make it to the bosses where they are, so you have an opportunity to fight them. And at the end of the game, you tally up your score down here at the bottom, depending on how well you did against the 3 bosses, how well you did at leveling up your character, how well you did at crafting relics, the gems you got, the minions you defeated, how much damage you took is going to be a penalty, depending on the highest value that you got to. If you completely died, if you ever took more damage than you had health, then you resurrect, but you're going to lose 9 points at the end. Then you tally up any additional points you got from your cards and your total at the end. That is your point value. On this game I played here, I got 61 points. I don't know if that is good or not. There's not really a scoring chart in the book to gauge how good you play, but you could play a couple games and just see how well you did. But overall, I think this game is pretty fun. It is just kind of a standard roll and write. It does, I think, simulate some of the neat things that a dungeon crawl has. It definitely simulates all of those kinds of things that we look for. It has a story, which is absolutely hilarious. And it has some boss monsters to fight. It has minions. It has loot. And it has traversing through a dungeon. So if maybe you have some friends who aren't super into really in-depth dungeon crawls, but they like lighter games, they like roll and write games, and you're just kind of maybe wanting to play something that you might enjoy the theme a little bit more, because if you're like me, then theme is really important. And even if a game is okay and you don't enjoy the theme like me, it is kind of hard to get into the game. And a lot of roll and writes, I don't particularly like the theme. There are some that I do, but for the most part, I tend to avoid them because the themes I just don't find interesting or entertaining. So a pretty cool roll and write with a theme that I like is kind of a winner. And the game's not very expensive, and I think it's something that you could keep around. It can play up to 8 players, so it can be kind of like a party game. It's super fast, like 20 minutes solo. And since everybody is using the same pool of dice, you don't have a lot of downtime. Somebody rolls and then everybody plays simultaneously, so it keeps things moving. So yeah, it's not a game that I'm going to pull out if I'm really in the mood for a dungeon crawl, but it is a game that I'll pull out when I want a dungeon-themed game with some other players who maybe aren't into that kind of thing. So, all right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this quick look at Paper Dungeons, a dungeon scrawler game, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.